Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Ace on Music. I'm joined as always by my producer Mark and my sidekick here, Sean, assistant, general genius, controller of my life.
Oh,
So
Jesus Christ. Thanks, Ace. I
today
appreciate that one.
we have today we have something really special for you. A good friend of mine has agreed to come on to the show. Now, anybody who watches this show on a regular basis knows that I'm a bit of a fanatic when it comes to cover art and cover artists. Having been a huge fan of it ever since I was a kid, following the artist's work and everything. So when I got the opportunity to first meet this gentleman, it was a big deal for me. And we have since become pretty good friends, and he's got some amazing stories about artists. So let me introduce Ioannis. Hey,
Hey,
buddy,
hey,
how's it
so are
going?
you, man? Look,
Excellent,
just an
excellent.
honor and a pleasure to talk to you.
Now, we first kind of crossed paths a while ago because you did one of the more recently iconic covers for one of the artists that I manage. That would be Uriah Heep. And so, if you don't mind, I would like to start there. I want to just go through a few of your covers, and then I'm going to lead into how you became a cover artist. So let's start how we met Uriah Heep. How did you get to work with that in that one of the four great bands of British hard rock?
I tell you, it just in all these situations, it was just nothing planned. It was just an accidentally what happened. What did is I did an interview for Record Collector, and I think it was Tim White. I think was the guy's name. After he interviewed me, he said, "Wow, it sounds like all the people that you idolized when you were young, you got to work with. Is there anybody left that you would like to work with?" And I said, "Well, there is this band." I said, they weren't as big in the U.S., but when I was growing up in Athens, Greece, when I was a kid, they were they were huge, especially in Europe." And he said, "Who's that?" And I said, "That's Uriah Heep." And I said, "I have a really soft place in my heart for that band. So it would mean a lot to me, or it would be special to me if I work with them." So coincidentally, they were on tour with Deep Purple, and I had done a lot of work for Deep Purple. And I guess Mick had seen my work or knew of who I was, and then I think he read the interview. And next thing I know, this was about a month after the article was out, I get an email and it's Mick Box. And at first I thought it was some guy playing a joke, right? But it turned out to be Mick. And he said, "Hey, we're doing our first album in 10 years. And I heard you're such a somebody told me you're a huge Heat fan. I love your stuff. Would you want to take a shot at it?" And I didn't know what was going on. I didn't even know they were, getting back together again. The first thing I asked obviously was, is Ken Hensley going to be in the band? All that stuff, right? And he told me what the lineup was going to be and everything. And the idea was, for the album was "Wake the Sleeper," and so we would discuss the idea back and forth, and then I came up with the concept, and that's how it sort of started. And it was. It was a really cool experience. I mean, it meant a lot to
Yeah, I
me
mean,
because I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say that album was one of the best received albums, both fan and critically, and definitely your artwork was a major part of the stage and all of that sort of thing as well. So I think that was a pretty powerful step back into the forum for Uriah Heep, led by your image. So, but you have a formidable body of work that you have done over the years. I mean, it's almost easier to say what bands you haven't done work with at some point rather than have. But that bears the question. I mean, in the pantheon of cover artists, there aren't all that many that are well known, but you're definitely among that pantheon. So, how did a young Johannes get into being a cover artist, an album cover artist? How did that all happen?
I decided not to own a restaurant like all my Greek relatives. I Ace, I'm working actually in a book about my work and everything. But what was intriguing to the publisher about the book are the stories, uh,
Yeah.
as the artwork, because it was just so crazy. I mean, it was so improbable. I'm a Greek immigrant. Uh, our family was very poor. We moved to the U.S. in the mid '60s. My uncle sponsored us. My dad was a house painter. Um, we worked. So when I was, and I ate up American culture, especially comic
Right.
books. I wanted to be a comic book artist actually, but I
Oh,
loved
okay.
music, and I was this stuff, and it's funny. I want to go back to Uriah Heep for a second, just to say something, to share a story with you about Uriah Heep. Was that
Please.
when I was 13, we were in Greece at the time. My parents said they were going to go back to Greece, so they returned me, and I was living with my aunt and my uncle, and for a year and going to school there. And then my parents decided not to return to Greece, so then I got shipped back to the U.S. They sent me there to start school, and that Christmas, um, my uncle said, "I know you like all this rock music stuff, and I don't know anything about it." So he gave me some money and he said, "Here, you can go and buy what you want for Christmas." So I beelined it down to the record store and I bought my very first two LPs. The two LPs that I bought was Demons and Wizards and Deep Purple Machine Head. Those were, like, to
Wow,
me, it
that's
was the
two,
greatest.
two that's two great ones to start with.
Well, that was what was going on. Easy Living was all over the radio, and Space Trucking was the single, not
Hmm.
Smoke on the Water. And that was all over the radio in Athens at the time. And so those were the bands. And I bought those, and I remember I was so mesmerized by the artwork from Demons and Wizards, which later found out to be Roger Dean, who is somebody that I finally got to meet and talk to. Um, I remember specifically, I told Mick the story. I was in school and it was physics class, and I was bored out of my wits, and I started to absentmindedly draw the wizard on my wooden desk with a pencil. And the
Okay.
more, the way they do the lessons, they walk up and down the aisles, the teachers, and they just spout off whatever it is. And of course, I wasn't paying attention at all. And all of a sudden, absentmindedly, I just kept doing it. All of a sudden, I realized that I had drawn the whole cover in pencil on my desk. And I also realized that it got very quiet in the classroom. And I looked up, and the teacher's sitting there staring at me, and he goes, in Greek, "Well, it looks like we have an artist in our midst." So my thing was, I had to stay after school and wash every desk, scrub it down, well, 200 of them in the class. So I told Mick he owes me because I suffer from my art because of him.
So, okay. Now
So
you touched on two.
the way it started was I
Right.
trying to give the Reader's Digest version of it. One day, working in my uncle's restaurant, two blocks down, I was 17. Uh, by that time, I was listening to hard rock. I had absolutely no interest in school. All I wanted to do was do record covers. That was it. That's all I cared about. Um, the guy down the street who ran the local rock club said, he came over. I said, "Hey, Bobby, what's going on?" It was, we worked till like 1, 2 in the morning, right? And I was working in the front. And he goes, "We ran out of ice. I need some ice." And I go back and, I got him a whole big, he brought me a big tub of ice, for the drinks. So their ice machine wasn't working. So I did it. And he goes, "By the way, your uncle says you're a really good artist." I said, "Oh, yeah, well, sort of, whatever." And he goes, would you want to do a poster for one of my bands that are playing? And I thought, okay, that's cool. I'll do that. And, in classic Ioannis fashion, I did the artwork the night before it was due. He said to me, "Bring it. If I like it, I'll pay you for it. It ain't for free." So I handed it to him, and he was like, "Wow, this is really great." And that was, his name was Michael Bolton, was the act, Blackjack, which turned out to be Michael Bolton later. So I've
Right.
known
Right.
Michael since 1977. So he got the art, And he says, "Wow, this is great!" And he gave me $50. I thought it was like all the money in the world. By that
And that was the
summer of
beginning.
my Yeah, by that summer of my junior year, I was doing artwork for every club, including Toad's Place, which is a famous club in New
Know it
Haven.
well. Know it well. Yep.
Yeah, um, every club, everybody knew about this Greek kid who did stuff. And by in 3 or 4 years later, I started to meet the record cover people. I mean, excuse me, representatives, radio stations. They all started just giving me art to do, and for me, it was great beer money. I was like, yeah, I
And
went
that event
home
and
and
that eventually led to you doing album covers and all kinds of other stuff like that.
yeah, yeah. The big break, my big break came when this guy named Lee Abrams, who went on to create XM Radio, called me one day out of the blue. He had found about my name from one of his radio stations he was consulting, and asked me. He said, "Yes, is doing a band, doing drama," and I was like, "Oh, wow, that's great." And he said, "Me and Chris Squire have a production company called Onward. Would you like to do the logo for it?" And I said, "Yeah." And that was it. That was 1980, and that's how it started.
Wow. Now your style of art, you definitely wear your influences quite openly in your art, and you mentioned a few moments ago one of the greats, Roger Dean. And tell me a little bit about how Roger influenced your work and how you ended up meeting him. I mean, you've actually met the man.
I've met him several times, but the one we really got a lengthy chance to talk to him was at Yes's 50th anniversary party. I met him a couple of times prior to that. It was kind of an emotional moment because I said to him, "You have no idea how much you changed my life." I mean, it's the truth. It was so improbable. This kid, who works. It was so crazy for me because one minute I was, making $100 a week, working at a restaurant, frying eggs and bacon,
Right.
and then going to school. And within 4 years, I was making tens of thousands of dollars and meeting anybody I wanted to. I mean, I've met, oh my God, everybody. I mean, Sabbath, Ronnie James Dio, the Priest. I mean, all those guys, and because of just relationships, just people to people. But um, with Roger Dean, what was interesting is he is a good artist, a draftsman, a good, he could draw. He became a
Hmm.
painter later, right? So
Okay.
since I'm self-taught. I never took any art classes or this or that. Later in college, I, majored in graphic design, but in school or high school, they didn't have any art courses, the school that I went to. So everything was self-taught. And like I said, I want to be a comic book artist. So I got what he was doing because he was doing black and white drawings, and he'll admit it also that he colored, and I understood how that worked, right? Like you do a pencil sketch, then you use black ink, idiot ink, and do the color stuff, and then you use dyes and you dye it. I could understand. I had no idea how you do acrylic, how you do oil. I didn't know how to mix paints. I didn't know how you do shading. I didn't get that, right? I mean, I could draw you Batman or Spider Man and color it. So Dean's things, when I looked at Dean's artwork, his early stuff in the early '70s, because he never took any formal art courses. He started out, he's an architect essentially. He does
Mm.
conceptual art. He comes from an engineering background, right? He fell into record cover art by accident, right? And it was the same thing with me. I wanted to be a comic book artist, and I wanted being a record cover artist. It fell by accident. So from that point of view, I completely understood. I could have, by the time I was 18, I could do a Roger Dean imitation painting like you would swear. I mean, I remember one of the bands I met was a band called Starcastle, and they saw my work and they thought it was Roger Dean. And I showed, they met me and they were like, "Who's this guy?" You know. Um, but album cover design, my biggest influence was Hypnosis, Storm Thurgeson's work, right?
Storm Thurgeson, of course.
Right.
Now
And what I
over
loved
the
about that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say over the time that we've known each other, you've told me some wonderful stories about Storm, and
Oh
the one
God.
that sticks out the most is the one about the momentary lapse of reason artwork. That's a really good story.
I, 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 I hear a ton of Storm stories. And the reason why is um, a joint friend we have, Merck Mercuriadis, used to manage
Yes.
Storm. So Merck, the later part of his life. Uh, so I would get stories from Merck, and I've got books on his life and this and that. Of course, I follow him. I became a fan of Storm's work by 78, 79. I was reading everything about him in books and interviews. But also Mick Rock, which I work very closely with, was good friends with Storm, and he'd tell me a ton of stories. Actually, Mick was asked to be part of Hypnosis, but he decided to just go on his own, and they hung out. And yeah, it's just he. Back in those days, he just made it up as they went along. There was no course to take on record cover art. There was no. They invented techniques and ideas that are used by ad agencies later. And Storm's big motto was, "I do it for real," which
Right.
means everything is a photographic illusion done by the way he sets things up. Everything's a set, it's a proportion. I mean,
No
later on he did.
photoshopping for that man.
Yeah, no, he
No
refused to
photoshopping
do
for Storm.
photoshopping, which made the price tags insane on his covers. But when you got Pink Floyd and your best, and they were first of all your high school friends to boot, right? I mean, that's how he
Right.
got into the business. He was taking English literature, him and Poe, in England, and then they wanted to meet girls and hang out and with all guys, and you know, Waters said, we need a cover, so why don't you guys do something? Then they went and they bought a used camera, and they used the school's facilities to process the photos, and they started by doing, I think, Social Secrets was the first thing they did for Pink Floyd, and it
But
was they
but
never looked back from then. But in Momentary Lapse of Reason, I mean, of course,
that's the
that's later
one.
on.
I got to hear the story about this one. I mean,
Okay, all right.
if you tell me that he does nothing by Photoshop and that he is going to create this stuff, I mean, some of the images used with momentary lapse of reason, like for example, how about that long line of beds that was on the shore there as the water was coming in. I mean, that must have been a
Yeah,
tremendous
there
amount of
was
work to put.
there was a line in the lyrics on the album because they go by the lyrics. I always try not to do it, but and it said about a sea of beds, um, and that was it. That got him going. So he went and described the idea to Gilmour, and Gilmour's attitude was always playing display was whatever, get on with it, just get it done. So he described that it was going to be a sea of beds, and they said okay. And the way you would do it, if I had to do it or you were going to do it, is you go, you find a bed, and you set it up, and you Photoshop it, and you make the sea and whatever. And that Storm, it had to be a certain kind of bed. He spent about 6 months traveling around the world to find these specific iron wrought beds, hospital beds, specifically like from the 1940s. He wanted a certain look. I don't know where God's earth he located them. Each one of these things weighed like about 200 pounds. And they went and they got, these, huge, carriers, the trucks, trailers, and they brought the beds and they found the perfect place, the coast of England for the perfect shot. And they lined up like hundreds and hundreds of beds, and they all had to be made perfectly the way Storm wanted them. And they had to set up the models and the dogs in the distance and the thing, and the whole thing was a crane shot, right? And it took him like forever. And just when he's ready to shoot, it started to rain. So back goes all the bed, back in the tractor tray. This thing took a week until finally he got the shot he wanted. And
And
that,
his rest
and
is
that was
history.
it. Yeah, the rest is, and you can repeat that story with "Wish You Were Here." You can repeat it with Led Zeppelin, "Houses of the Holy." It's just unbelievable what he went through. But I admire the hell out of him, and one of the reasons I've worked with a lot of different bands is I sort of owe it to Storm how he influenced me. Dean influenced my art personally, how I paint or I draw, a combination of people that I like. But as an album designer, it was Storm because he never had a set style, right? I mean, either be Black Sabbath or Led Zeppelin or Yes. He sort of had, I mean, he's mostly known for Pink Floyd, but he's worked with a ton of bands because it's the way they approach it and the way you approach it working with a music act. I mean, Rush doesn't want to look like Yes, and Yes doesn't want to look like the Allman Brothers, and the Allman Brothers don't want to look like Black Sabbath. So each one has their own flag. So if you're going to survive in this industry, to do multiple work as a design studio, you have to be flexible. And it did create some problems for me in the beginning when I was pitching artists until they caught on that I could tune in into what they were about. I remember when Trey
Well, that
Gunn showed up.
that brings up an interesting point. Then I'd like to make. I mean, you have done scores of album covers in your career, and if you don't mind, I'd like to just talk to you about a few of my favorites and get the story behind them.
Sure.
Let's start with probably what is maybe my favorite cover that you did besides the Uriah Heep one, and that is a band that I have loved for a long time, Sepultura, and you did their iconic Chaos AD cover, one of the best covers. And I mean, I've toured with those guys, I know them, and I have seen many fans come to meet and greets that have either that entire album or elements of that album cover tattooed onto their body. Tell me
Yeah.
about that one, and tell me about how that kind of how it impacts you to see your artwork permanently etched into someone's flesh.
Okay. The thing with Sepultura, though, is it's not my artwork. The thing with Sepultura is that by the time we were reaching that point, I was doing maybe 4 or 5 covers per month.
Hmm.
I had reached that
Hmm.
point. And like Storm, I was very open. It gave me a chance to work with people that I idolized as I grew up,
Hmm.
like Bob Carlos Clark, for instance. He's the guy known. He did Sin After Sin for Judas Priest. He did Ozzy Osbourne. He's an incredible photographer. He did The Damned, and I wanted to work with him, just like I work with Mick Rock. I work with Big Daddy Roth. He used to do the wacky packy stickers of the
Oh
monsters
yeah.
driving the gangsters. So I used them for this band called Noisy Mama, and it was just so cool to talk to them. So with Sepultura specifically, I was brought into Roadrunner to work with it, and we said, well, Michael Whelan. I grew up looking at Michael Whelan's artwork, and it was amazing, amazing work that he had done. And when they told me, I think he had a relationship with the band, anyways. And so when they told me about working with Michael Whelan, I thought, are you kidding me? Of course. So Michael presented, we did the idea, we came up, he presented the painting, and then I just sort of took it from there and ran with it. It created, the graphics, the visuals, it created the logo, the symbol for the tour. And I used his art as a basis. I remember, again, we didn't have Photoshop in those days. So like one of my most memorable pieces that I actually did for that package was we wanted to present a photo of the band to make them look cool. So I got black and white pictures of them that looked pretty ordinary, and then we Xeroxed them, and then we ripped them up into all kinds of different shapes, and then what we did is then we sewed them with the actual thread and a needle, so they looked like disfigured. They had been sewn together, the photos, and then I rephotographed that, and then I hand colored it, and he gave it an amazing surreal look. And I remember Max losing his mind when he saw that. He was like, "Oh my god, this is like so cool,"
Oh, it's
because it looks
awesome.
so
I mean, and
so
Michael
bad.
Whalen. I mean, I grew up being a big science fiction fan, and his artwork adorned so many of the books I grew up with, and he just
Yeah,
had that amazing style. But
he's an amazing.
another one of your covers that really always appealed to me was when you worked with the Allman Brothers and you did the Where It All Began, because I think that cover really is your tip of the hat to Roger, because it really reminds me of Roger's style on that particular
Yeah,
cover.
yeah. It's the way he did the rocks, marbling. I figured out how to do marbling. It's and I did that, and the way it's painted. And boy, the way that whole story came about was really funny. How the whole thing with the Allman Brothers came about. We still
Okay.
talk about it today. I don't know if you want to indulge me on that. Yeah, if you want me to indulge you on that
Absolutely.
story.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Let's hear it.
the call kit. Again, I'll try to give the Reader's Digest though because I talk a lot. But the story they gave was it was a merchandising company. A friend of mine who worked with the merchandising company. He also worked with the concert promoters, and he had the relationship with the band. Bert Holman had just become their manager earlier, and they had just started to really put the band back together again in the early '90s. And so the calls they were going to go out on the Horde tour, I think it was called, and they needed merchandising. And I, they said you go up to Boston and pitch the manager. I was like, okay. So I put up some couple of ideas together, what I thought would be good merch for the Allman Brothers. And last minute, I said, I'm going to bring one of my paintings along. And it was, I can't remember which one it was, but I brought my painting along, and I went up there. I'm sitting down. It was all pleasantry exchange, and we're talking. And I'm making my pitch, and I'm showing him the stuff, and I'm watching him. His eyes glaze over, and he kept looking over my shoulder. And I'd done enough by this time in my career that I thought, okay, I lost this one. He's not responding. He doesn't want to be. You know, all of a sudden he said to me, "Stop, stop, hold on." He goes, "That," and he points to my painting. I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I really like that." He said, "Oh, okay." He goes, "Forget merchandise and design. I need a record cover." I'm like, "Oh, uh, okay." Um, he says, "Let me show you something." And he goes back and he brings me this drawing of a mushroom and these four naked women dancing around it. And I said,
Okay.
"Okay, what's?" He said, "Dickie Betts. He drew that. He likes this idea. Can you work with this?" I said, "I don't know about the dancing women." I said, I could definitely do something with the mushroom." He said, "Okay, take the mushroom to the next level." That was the brief, right? I knew any music. I mean, well, I knew who they were. It was like it was going to be a rap act. And he goes, "I want I just want you to take it to the next level." I said, "Where are they now? Where are they recording?" And he goes, "They're in Jupiter, Florida." As a matter of fact, "Greetings from Jupiter" was the original title, right? Um,
Okay.
which influenced the background. But I did. I said, "Well, what do you think about the idea of like?" Actually, it's right behind me. You see it? It's all the way back there. That's a gold record that I have from the Allman Brothers.
Oh yeah.
To my, you see it? That there it is back there, right next to Ingve Malmsteen. Yeah. And I think you can see way all the way up on the right there. So he goes to me. I said, "What do you think about like the mushroom, like in the bayou kind of a thing? Kind of a swamp kind of concept, like because they're southern and all that." It's like, "Yeah, I
Hmm.
like this." He goes, "Great." He goes, "Great." I said, "When do you need this by?" He goes, "You got 2 days." I said, "To come up with an idea." I said, He goes, "Listen, we're way behind schedule. You got to move here." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I said, "All right, I'll be right back with an idea." So I drive back to Connecticut, and I figured these guys are not going to get pencil sketches. They're just not going to get it. So I do this miniature painting that's about this big, literally. And then I
Okay.
put a piece of acetate over it, and I stuck the logo. Again, Photoshop, this is 1994. Photoshop is in infancy. You couldn't do anything like that. It would take a year and a day. I had done some
Right.
digital in the late '80s, but it was like $500 for a half an hour in a design studio in New York to be able to get like one circular ball suspended in air. It would take
Right.
forever. So I do the drawing, I finish it, we drive back. I show it to Bert. He's like, "Oh, oh, this is great. This is perfect." He goes, "Great." He goes, "Listen, go back. I'll call you. I'm going to show it to Dickie, see what he thinks." Because, Dickie Betts kind of ran the show back then. And he goes, "The rest of them,
Hmm.
and then I'll let you know." I'm like, "Okay." So I drive back. He goes, I get a call like a day later. It's like, "Fantastic. They love it." This is great. He said, oh, okay, Bert. First, he goes, oh, great. All right. He goes, all right, so listen, I'm going to send you the credits and just bring it to the record label tomorrow, and they're ready to go. I'm like,
Uh,
I have to do the painting first. He goes, what do you mean you have to do the painting? He said, Bert, that was a comp. That was a sketch. He said, I thought that was the painting. That was the real thing. I'm like, it's like, I said, that's like the size of a CD. What, you know, what? That's not it. Like, oh, no. I got to go back and call him again. And he's like, all right, you got 1 week, all right? My daughter, she was about a year old at the time. And so I have video where I'm painting, and she's 27 years old now. 26 years ago, man. It's hard to believe. And she was sitting there, and she was, she's got little paints in her hands, and she's putting marks on the painting. And so I was sort of babysitting her, and I'm playing music, and I'm painting the art at the same time, right? And so I finished the painting, right? I said, it's ready. He goes, okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to come up here. I got him in a warehouse, and they're rehearsing, all right? Bring up the artwork. I get him to sign off on it, okay? And then we can go from there. He said, how soon can you do the layouts and all that stuff? And I said, a few days. He goes, okay, bring it up here. So I drive up there. We go in. I put the painting in my hand. I put it in a nice frame so it looks a little presentable, right? So I'm walking in there, and there I am, about 5 feet away. There's Greg Allman, and they're rehearsing. That was before they had Derek trucks, right? So it was the band, the original band, with the late Woody, the bass player. So Bert comes to me, he goes, okay, here's what you want you to do. I want you to go to the next room. I want you to set it up. I'm going to bring one of them at a time, okay? Because I don't want them to start arguing with each other. And each one of them is going to see it, and they're going to sign off on it, and that'll be the end of that. He says, you don't see a word. I said, okay. I walk in, so in comes Greg Allman first, and he says, Greg, what do you think? He says, no, I really like it. I like it. And he brings in Butch Trucks next. Butch, by the way, turned out to be my biggest friend in the band for so many years, and I miss him so dearly now. But and he brought him one at a time, and the last one was Dickie. Remember, it was his idea now, right? Mm-hmm. So Dickie comes in and goes, here it is, Dickie, this is it. And he's like, oh yeah, this to me says where it all begins. And that's the first time I heard the title.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was the first thing I looked at. I thought of that, as they were walking in, right, talking, Bert hangs over to me and whispers. He said, listen, I'm not going to say anything. And this looks fantastic. But this looks nothing at all like the comp you showed me. And he was right, because I brought him the comp and I left it with him, right? And I had to go back and redo the thing. I had to do it from memory. And obviously, but the only thing they had in common was the mushroom. But the whole landscape, everything had changed, right? The colors, everything, right? Bert said, look, they like it. I'm not going to say anything if you're not going to say anything. And when Vicky saw it, he says, come here, Ioannis. He goes, he always got my name wrong. He hugged me, gives me this kiss, right? It's like this bear hug. He goes, hey, man, Dickie loves you. He goes to me. I was like, all right. He goes, all right, listen, they're playing their first gig in Poughkeepsie, New York next week. Go up there, show them the layouts, get them to sign off on it, and we're good to go. And that was that. I had no idea how big this was going to become. It became one of their iconic images. A ton of merchandise.
Yeah, literally the rest is history on that one. Well, that is the end of part 1 of 2 of our interview with Ioannis. I want to thank Mark and Sean for being here, and of course Ioannis for his time and his great stories. Thank all of you for your continued support. You can send us emails at acetalksmusic@gmail.com, and also check out our After Hours show on the Patreon platform. We do our After Hours show over there. In the meantime, until next week, stay safe.